Hi, my name is Sandy Loam, and this is the O Horizon. Today we are bringing you a special investigative report on a topic that may shock, disturb, and physically sicken you. We ask our listeners to proceed with caution. Today we will be chronicling the hunt for a serial tiller. Since the dawn of civilization, humanity has engaged in tilling, starting with simple sharpened sticks and livestock, moving to steel plows pulled by teams of animals, and eventually to a dizzying array of mechanized tools that rip, tear, and crush soils around the world. Recently, in an undisclosed location, a group of investigators discovered the site of one of these brutal tillings. I will be interviewing each of them to find out the grisly details of this case. Also, and this is a first for this podcast, we have exclusive access to the prime suspect, a person connected to many other past tillings, possibly as many as 6 tillings a year. Listeners, today you will get a peek into the mind of a tiller. The first person we will be talking to in this case is Lee Goom. He is an agronomist working with the other investigators on this case. Mr. Goom, can you tell us a little bit about what you discovered about the field? Rumor has it that the field was left, well, bare. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, Mr. Loam, the first thing I noticed was the lack of plant residue on the surface of the soil. As an agronomist, it's important that I consider crop production and soil management in its entirety of the process. Recently, cover crops have been proven to have the potential to reduce erosion, maintain active rhizospheres, redeposit nutrients in the soil lost from erosion, leaching, chemical inputs, or intensive monocropping and tilling systems.
So it sounds like cover crops protect the surface of the soil, but what about the deeper issue? Let's get to the root of this.
Well, tillage has always been an attempt to liberate nutrients from the soil and make them more available to the plants. I think if we can change our mindset to naturally restore accessible nutrients in the soil with further research, we could be successful in reducing our number of times tilling a year. Many cover crop options actually have the potential to sequester those nutrients back into the soil, such as legumes or other nitrogen fixers. One of these I spoke about was the tillage radish, a plant with a deep tap root that has the ability to break through soil barriers such as rocks, durapan, or larger aggregates that may make it difficult for the plant to grow. These large taproots can liberate those nutrients similar to tilling, although rather than breaking up aggregates mechanically, can do so with an active rhizosphere, tapping into water deep in the soil and depositing it inside of their taproots. This could be followed up with a mow in the field to mulch the foliage onto the surface soil and reduce erosion. Back to our case, I noticed there was no plant residue on the surface of the soil, something that could have been avoided with a cover crop. Our field was tilled and left bare, which is bad, although mulch is better. Radishes, that I spoke about previously, subsequently die after being mowed over, redepositing the nutrients stored in their taproots from deep in the soil into upper surface levels, making them available to the crops, and therefore reducing your need to till your soil.
So listeners, it looks like the tiller left the field vulnerable to the elements. Wind, rain, field traffic, eroding away the soil and leaving it dead and barren. But this crime runs deeper. We need to figure out exactly how much damage was done and to who. The next person I will be interviewing is soil biologist Mike Oriza. Mike, it seems that in these cases there's always a victim that is overlooked, the little guy that nobody stood up for. Can you tell me a little bit more about these hidden victims?
Of course. I'm first going to talk about the types and importance of soil microbes regarding soil health. So the first group would be bacteria. Bacteria is the crucial workforce of soils, and they can live in almost any habitat. They are the final stage of breaking down nutrients and releasing them to the root zone for the plant. Some nitrogen-fixing bacteria form mutually beneficial associations with plants. A next group is fungi. Like bacteria, they also live in the root zone and help make nutrients available to plants. For example, mycorrhiza is a fungi that facilitate water and nutrient uptake by roots and plants to provide sugars, amino acids, and other nutrients. Protozoas are larger microbes that love to consume and be surrounded by other bacteria. In fact, nutrients that are eaten by bacteria are released when protozoa in turn eat the bacteria. Nematodes are microscopic worms that live around or inside the plant.
But Mike, aren't nematodes just the miscreant thugs of the soil? Isn't getting them off of our streets, or fields, I guess, isn't that just a favor to society?
In a sense, yes. Some nematodes are predators, while others are actually beneficial. They eat pathogenic nematodes and secrete nutrients to the plant. Another group is algae. Algae, like crop plants, convert sunlight into complex molecules like sugars, which they can use for energy and to help build other molecules they need. Algae are found in abundance in the flooded soils of swamps and rice paddies, and they can be found on the surface of poorly drained soils and in wet depressions. Viruses may influence the ecology of soil biological communities through both an ability to transfer genes from host to host and as a potential cause of microbial mortality. Despite a lack of a deeper knowledge on their role, viruses influence the concentration and turnover rate of gas exchange, as well as nutrient levels in global cycles. I now want to touch on the conventional and alternative tillage options. Soil organic carbon is the main source of energy for soil microorganisms. As a result, they profoundly affect soil properties including aggregate stability, soil moisture, and nutrient cycling. Tillage fractures soil, it disrupts soil structure, and this accelerates surface runoff and soil erosion. Tillage also reduces crop residue, which helps cushion the force of pounding raindrops. Without this runoff, will literally carry microbes away from plant rows and fields. Conventional tillage has greatly disturbed the microbes by not only destroying their interconnected habitat, but diminished their food source. This ultimately leads to sinking levels of microbial health. This in turn limits the soil quality and prevents plants benefiting from microprocesses. This creates a dependency on fertilizers to supply plants with nutrients instead of using the wealth of soil organic matter that was either destroyed through tillage or has become unusable due to less soil microbes. The best alternative for soil microbes specifically is a no-tillage or a very light scrape till in order to break up tougher aggregates and release some nutrients available for microbes to process. Cover cropping also provides an enormous amount of soil organic carbon, which diversifies and causes soil microbes to act more efficiently due to an abundance of these nutrients.
Oh, the microbial community. This brutal tilling has left a gaping hole in our hearts as well as in the soil. But in addition to harming the inhabitants of the soil directly, it appears that future generations of microbes are in danger as well. Our next interview delves into this further. Hugh Muss is a soil scientist. He is hard at work on this case, but has given us some of his valuable time to talk about this investigation. Hugh, what can you tell us about the effects that the tilling of this field has had from your perspective?
Well, Mr. Lum, soil organic matter is one of the best ways to improve soil health. Increasing SOM can decrease erosion, increase infiltration, nutrient availability, and form better aggregation. Tillage, on the other hand, destroys many of these positive benefits. Adding SOM to the soil is generally a pretty simple process. Cover cropping, composting, and preserving naturally occurring SOM in the soil by reducing the use of pesticides in tillage are all effective methods. SOM can even decrease the amount of CO2 released from the soil by creating a buffer between the soil and open air. By increasing SOM, a healthy rhizosphere can be established and maintained year after year. SOM can increase the cation exchange capacity, or the CEC, of soils, which allows positively charged ions in mineral nutrients like calcium, aluminum, and iron to bond with negatively charged soil particles. This changes their form into one that is usable to plants. Organisms within the rhizosphere also benefit from soil organic matter.
Hugh, what effects does SOM have on the microbial community? Is it true that all the cool organisms are doing it nowadays?
Well, soil microbes are vital to healthy soil, and they thrive in soil rich with organic matter. This tillage murder could have been prevented altogether if the farmer had adequate SOM content. This field was erosive, barren, and nutrient depleted.
It all could have been avoided. Listeners, in the long history of this podcast, I don't think I have ever seen such a senseless tilling. As this investigation winds down, we are going to get a final analysis on structure from an expert. This final interview is with soil scientist Claude Clay. Mr. Clay, can you tell us a little bit about the effect that the tilling has had on the structure of the soil? Break it down for us.
Thanks, Sandy. The act of tillage destroys soil aggregation, physically and chemically. When you're thinking about pulling your implement through your field out there, when you're tearing it up, it's physically destroying those clods. When you do that, you're also introducing an oxygen in there and chemically destroying your aggregates by speeding up redox reactions and decomposition. That leads to poor aggregate stability, which is going to lead to erosion, runoff, undesired soil structures like surface crusts, and poor infiltration. All of those things lead to unsatisfactory conditions for your plant or crop production. If you think about erosion, your water and your nutrients are all going off soil, and then you're creating subsurface soil structures that your roots can't get through, and then infiltration, water can't get through. You don't want that surface structure. Aggregation is impacted by your soil management. It's basically a measure of your soil structure. And changes in that aggregate stability can provide evidence that your soil quality is either improving or declining. Your stability of aggregates greatly depends on the organic matter and the biological activity in the soil. Constant tilling speeds up the rate of decomposition, and it depletes your organic matter. And that's the food source for your microbes in the soil. And if they don't have a food source, then there's not going to be as much of them around. With a decrease in microbes, they're not going to produce as many organic compounds that help to cement soil particles together and create better aggregation. Roots and fungi also help to bind and keep those soil particles together, but tillage disrupts their life cycles and makes it hard to impossible for them to take hold, survive, and thrive. And macroorganism movement through the soil also mixes your soil particles, and some organisms like earthworms ingest the soil and produce well-aggregated soil when they excrete it. Those aggregates and biological mixing are negatively influenced by tillage. Increased tilling also destroys soil pores, which are essential to the movement of water, nutrients, and gases in the soil. And there's also a place for water and nutrients and microbes to live. And the more diverse soil pores that we have, big ones, small ones, the more diverse microbes there are in there. And the more diverse microbes you have, the more production your soil is going to have. And everyone wants more productive soil.
So, tell me, Claude, is this just a surface problem? How deep does the destruction run?
It's not just a surface problem. Like I said earlier, you can create surface crusts or subsurface crusts, like plow pans and restrictive layers in the soil that block or prevent water and roots and nutrients from getting down into the soil, which all of those help to create aggregation. Staying away from bare soil is pretty much the first step to quality soil aggregation. You're not going to get the raindrops that break up and detach soil particles, and when you have that organic matter already laid down, when it dies, you're reintroducing organic matter into the soil. And then when you don't till it, you're not physically destroying it anymore, and the microbes and roots and everything can flourish and thrive. If these ideas were considered, a tillage murder could have been prevented.
Listeners, this final segment is not for the weak of heart. I will be interviewing the prime suspect in this case, a person whose identity must be concealed for the time being, and as such has had his voice altered for this podcast. We will refer to him as John Doe. No, John Deere. If you are weak of stomach, a young child, or a nematode, we ask that you please proceed with caution. Listen at your own risk. Mr. Deere, the evidence of your crime is plentiful and condemning against you. We know you did it. You figuratively, and now that I take a closer look, also literally have mud on your hands. I really have just one question to start. Why? Why did you resort to tilling? What was your motive?
I'll tell you why I tilled. Tillage breaks up compacted soils and creates a viable seedbed for crops. This can help to increase water infiltration in the short term. It can also increase aeration in the short term as well. This incorporates organic matter and crop residues into the soil. Providing physical management of weeds is a top priority for me and my yield. Part of leveling a field for proper drainage and crop efficiency is my goal.
Now that we understand why, and I hesitate to even ask this next question, how? How did you commit this act? And please, just the facts.
My means, method, and equipment for my conventional tillage included plows, reapers, chisels, drills, diskers, and rotary tillers. Intensive conventional tilling is the standard method for me. Less than 50% of crop residues are left on my soil.
Are there others like you? Where did this tilling spree begin?
Of course there's others like me. Ever since the dawn of basic agriculture we've been tilling. I've always tilled, my daddy tilled, and I'll continue to teach my sons to till.
So we know the motive, means, and opportunity, but that still leaves the personal motivation. Why would you treat a field, an innocent, productive, healthy field this way? What would motivate you to do this?
I hate weeds. I hate seeing them on my land. I like the soil bare. I'll till again and I'll always till.